Today begins what's known as the season after Trinity, which is a little bit confusing. In the Roman Catholic Church, they've changed that where they now call it the season of ordinary time. And a lot of folks objected to that when that change was made. I was not one of them. I thought that was a good name for this season because most of our lives are wrapped up in ordinary time. Most of our lives, we face the day in, day out routines that we always go through, but with the understanding that it is in the midst of our ordinary time that God most often appears to us, makes himself known to us, makes his will known to us, makes his presence known to us in the ordinary events of our daily lives, in the people and places and situations that he places before us every day. And that's one of the themes that emerges out of today's gospel and the first lesson as well. In the gospel for today, Jesus tells the parable of the rich man and Lazarus. It's a parable and a story that we're familiar with. Christ often taught with parables. And the parables that he used also had different layers of meaning. There was an obvious layer, and then also other layers that were not so obvious, but also meant to be understood. So in the story today, the story of the beggar, Lazarus, and the rich man, the man he's talking about is really rich, really wealthy. That's the sense of the language in the original text, is that this man is extraordinarily wealthy, and that he has this banquet-like dinner every day, sumptuous banquet. What most folks don't know is at this time, there was no silverware. There was no knives and forks, and people ate with their hands. And what they did was they would wipe their hands on pieces of bread and throw that bread away. And that's the kind of scraps that Lazarus was wanting. So this is a very culturally conditioned kind of thing as well. But both of them die. The rich man goes to Hades, hell. Lazarus apparently goes to heaven. But it's kind of curious. There is nothing in the parable taught by Christ that suggests that the rich man was a bad man. Nothing that said that he did anything wrong. Nothing said about him being mean or cruel or unworthy or anything like that. So why was he in torment? Why didn't he go to heaven as well? And the answer to that is a little bit frightening. He didn't go to heaven because throughout his life, he didn't pay attention. Didn't notice in the ordinary situations of life, people in need, people who wanted, people who needed his help. He didn't notice them, didn't care about them, and as a result, was damned. We need to hear that and to be aware of that in our lives as well, because it hasn't stopped. In our midst and in the world around us and throughout the world, there is poverty and suffering and pain that's so incredible. And some of the things that we go through, as difficult as they might be, don't in any way measure up to the suffering and pain and hunger that so many people around the world have. If we cast a blind eye toward them, if we fail to notice them, if we fail to care about them, if we fail in one way or another to let their presence impact us and speak to us, then we suffer the same fate as the rich man. We're not, any of us, rich or wealthy, but we do have things, and we do have good things, and we have many blessings living in a land of opportunity such as we do. If we don't notice the suffering and the pain that's all around us, if we don't care about it, if we don't let it touch us, then we too, at the end of our days, will find ourselves in a place we'd rather not be. And that's something that we do need to think about and consider. This passage is also a warning to the people of Israel and also a warning to us. The rich man says, I want to go and tell my family to straighten up, or send Lazarus and tell my family to get with it. And the answer is, well, they have Moses and the prophets, let them hear them. And he says, no, but if somebody came back from the dead, then they would believe. And Abraham's answer in this parable, Christ's answer is, no, it won't make any difference. If you're blind, you're blind. It won't make any difference. That was a warning to the people of Israel. It's a warning to us as well. Failure to notice things, failure to care, is our damnation, and we need to be aware of it. Each of the parables of Christ have their own individual meanings, but they also have a common meaning. And the common meaning that runs through all of his parables is simply this: things are not always what they seem, and that you need to expect the unexpected, and to realize that what you think is impossible or improbable is more often than not very possible, very probable. For example, it was impossible for a Jew to think that a Samaritan could be good. They were just simply evil people in the eyes of the Jews. But Jesus talked about a good Samaritan, again challenging them to break out of their pre-existing patterns of thought and activity and behavior, and to realize that in his presence, in his kingdom, everything is new and different, and everything about him and living with him invites us to change, invites us to live lives of transformation so that we can enter into his fullness, enter into the kingdom, participate with him in everything that he has promised us. Things are not always what they seem. A rich man with all kinds of wealth and property doesn't go to heaven. That time, and even now, we deal with that, what people call the gospel of prosperity. It's often thought that if you have wealth and power and property and so forth, that's a sign of God's favor. And that if you're poor, there's something wrong with you, or you've done something wrong. That is an attitude that very much exists in our country even now. And it causes people to look the other way when they see suffering, when they see poverty, when they see despair, to look the other way and say, thank God I don't have to deal with that. And what Jesus would tell us is that's not where we need to be. We need to understand that in the ordinary and typical events of our daily lives, he appears to us and he speaks to us and he challenges us. Come a little bit deeper. Understand a little bit more. Understand the reality of the kind of kingdom that I'm talking about, the kind of way of life that I'm talking about. That's where he wants us, and that's where he challenges us. And sometimes his teachings and his words are not easy. Today is one of those examples. What he had to say in this parable was sharp. It stung those who heard it, and it ought to sting us here today. It's a hard teaching to let go of our desire for wealth and prosperity, and to learn to look at the world and at life all around us, to see his presence in everything that we deal with every day, and to see his presence also in the face of the poor and of the suffering. We understand that, and we're doing okay. We have all this food and money that we collect for the needy throughout Davidson County, and that's good. And that's what we ought to be doing. But we also ought to be realizing that there are needs all around us. Every day we meet people, one way or another, who are hurting or suffering. Do we give them the time and the attention and the care that they need? Or do we just look the other way and say, let them deal with it? That's the challenge that Christ placed before us. To see Him everywhere, in all places, in all things, in all people, in all the situations of our ordinary times and ordinary lives. Amen.